T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another exciting episode of the Boelens Pythons Roundtable. I am your host, Ari Flagle, and this is episode 9. I'm very excited, obviously, as I always say, bringing out all these wonderful guests. But I have a very good friend of mine that I've been finally able to get to be able to come on with both of our crazy schedules and such. So I'd like to welcome on today good friend Josh Hanson. Josh, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, sweet! Look, and you got the snake. Awesome, man. We're starting off great today. Starting off good.
When we talk to Ari, we've got to bring out the Boelens.
That's right, man. How you been? I saw you. What's been a couple weeks now? The last time.
Excellent. Yeah, Ari made a visit to the deep, cold north of Minneapolis, and we got to spend some time together and tour the facility and hang out. So. Good times.
Yeah, it was great. I was not. I'm like a desert and jungle rat, so that weather was absolutely not in my bag for sure. I was not used to that. It was I left Texas at I think it was 70 degrees, and I opened the window shade on the plane, and it was just like ice everywhere. I was not a fan. So, but whatever, it's cool. But it was a fun trip. That was I went and I did a presentation, couple presentations, and then. It was awesome that I finally got to spend more than just sitting in the lobby talking about stuff at a reptile convention with you and checking out your incredible facility. And it was a good time. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So how have you been, man? Anything new going on? Are you working on anything new? Or I know I saw so many cool things when I was there, and obviously for people watching right now, they get to see this incredible backdrop you have, which I'm so jealous of. It's you just have some beautiful enclosures, man. It just the space and then just the design work on them is just stellar, man. Hands down.
Yeah. Well, I've been into reptiles more intensely for probably the past 9 years, 10 years ish, and but had reptiles kind of my whole life. But it was probably, I think it was 2018 or so when Ari and I met for the first time, because it was getting my toes into Boelens and just doing research on them. And Ari was doing something really cool. I don't think there's many people out there that walk the talk and actually go and are doing the research for no other purpose than to get data and stuff. So I was highly intrigued by Project Black Python from the onset, and that actually made my kind of obsession with Boelens pythons and learning as much as I could even more, because somebody was actually doing something. If you're into basins or colubrids or whatever, there's not that person that is there in the moss and dirt and cloud forest doing the work. So it was really cool. So Ari and I worked together then after that for a little bit on some trips, and of course COVID was hitting, and that didn't mean the work had to stop. So I think Ari was still doing some traveling back then, and
that was a crazy time. I always have been for whatever it is, I've been referencing back to COVID days, where it's we had so many things just kind of halted, which obviously they did because we didn't know what we were dealing with, and we had to stay at home, and we had to do this and all. We forgot what it was like to be human beings, where we were interacting one-on-one with people, which the new generation of kids were just whatever, this is just another day for us, because they're always on their phone talking. But we did some fun stuff together. Obviously we're still communicating about ideas and projects and things, which is great. And I really appreciate that. It's a lot of work. A lot of people, really, I don't think understand the gist of what goes into it, just being able to get to the level where things start happening. And I believe that holds true for so many other things as well, whether it's, a reptile project or a business project or anything. You've got that build up time where it's just like, okay, we've got to do all this legwork to get to a certain point. And, that point might not even be obtainable for a number of years. And that's what, my stuff, it took me, I think, at least 3 years before I was even able to actually see an animal. So, it's, I'm just so fortunate, I feel, to be able to speak with people and refer to people like yourself as a friend, that are so like-minded and passionate about what we're doing.
And I think too, just for people that are watching and people that are interested in Boelens, I was much better at this in the past, but financially supporting to the project. I think Ari, you're headed out really soon to go back there, and back when you were doing the trips in kind of the COVID-ish area and stuff like that, and you just talking about the ramp up time of what it takes to build something. To me, I kind of look back and I see now you're at that stage where you did all that dirty work in the background a little bit, and we were buying little cameras and sensors and doing this and that. But the work doesn't stop. It's just different work. And so myself and anybody else that's interested, Project Black Python, toss some funds there or come up with a special idea. And I bet Ari might think about doing it. If you're like, hey, I want to sponsor the monitoring or the trigger camera or the whatever. That's what Ari and I did in the past, and that was pretty cool to do a dive in.
And it was awesome because I was able to incorporate like your name and your involvement into like presentations that I'm doing, any kind of research I'm putting out publishing wise. So like that was it's just real flattering. I just really enjoy it because it's like it makes me really push even harder for what I'm doing, because now I have like such a wonderful team of backers, but not just backers, but just like it's not backers, they're family. Like you guys are family, because like we're trying to figure out what makes these animals tick. And that's exciting, but a lot of people don't understand that it's a lot of money, and it costs a lot of money to do this. And it's not, these places I go to are like, poverty stricken, but to get there, you're talking like multiple days to fly, and then renting vehicles, and it all adds up so quickly. And then the mental tax that it takes on you as well, being in these places. And like I just posted up a funny thing on my Instagram the other day, where it was, I get messaged by people daily, it feels like, on wanting to go and see a Boelens python in the wild. And I would love to be able to do that, but it's just so dangerous. And I posted a picture of this guy's like, he's got an arrow in his chest and he's in the hospital, and the guy's trying to pull the arrow out. And people are like, does this mean it's safe? And I'm like,
I mean, I had the time and I had the interest back, a number of years ago when you were going, and I was scared to death. And not only from that, you were incredibly sick.
Yeah, I got really sick. I've gotten sick a couple times, but the last one that like you're referencing, it was like really sick. And then going right after COVID, like I'm pretty sure I was the only foreigner that stepped foot off that plane after COVID was cleared in those areas. And I had to have like, I think 4 or 5 vaccinations to be able to even go to these red zones, because they were so like governmentally controlled, and nobody wanted to go because there's just like, first off, so it was like, I remember walking off, and it was just like, and I was writing about it in this new book. It's like the tumbleweed kind of goes by, and there's like nobody out there. And then, the saloon door kind of opens up and everybody looks outside. It was kind of like that Western kind of feel, like, and I'm like thinking to myself, oh man, what did I just do? Like, what am I walking into? But, it turned out to be, every one of my trips has, whether I try to go out with like a set mindset of what I'm going to accomplish. And a lot of times that's just not a reality because of, time permitting, logistics, unrest, civil unrest, things like that. So it's like, but always something always presents itself positively towards my work and the trip. So it always makes it worth it. But I was thinking to myself, what am I doing here and what is possibly going to happen? So, but no, it's wild, man. It's wild. But enough about me. I want to talk about you, man, because you're doing some incredible stuff. And I have to comment again on those cages, man. They were just you're working heavily with and I'm going to butcher the name because I can't the wonderful company that you're working with. It's yes. And they make some stellar enclosures. And Tamura, that's right. Tamura. Yeah, Tamura. And I apologize for butchering it up, but it's such a, if anybody's not familiar with it, you need to check it out. It's literally, it's a gallery. You're creating a gallery.
Yeah, thanks. It was an interesting process because in the early days in 2018 and stuff, when I was starting to work with Boelens, I had a small cabin that was close to my house, and it was like an 80-year-old, 100-year-old cabin that was I brought electricity into and put a generator on the unit right away because I could not trust anything in that place. But it was the traditional reptile room of stacked cages, and I was using every inch that I could of this space, and I kind of made a home office out of it. But I was fortunate to get to build a new home in the past couple of years, and had the time to put some thought about, okay, if this is how I'm doing it now, how do I make my life easier? How do I make the snakes have what they need and other reptiles? And how do I balance that out with a wife and 4 kids and everyone else that has to live in the same space? So, so I did it was a little bit late in the game of building the house, but I was you described it. I've never described it that way, but it kind of was like a gallery of okay, concrete floors, white ceiling. Let's put the lighting where we can in. And then Dale Tamura of Tamura Designs. Yes. I've been working with him.
A master at his craft.
Yeah. And that's what he is. It's a craft for him. It's him and a small group of highly skilled fabricators in just south of LA. And really went to him and I said, I kind of want to just build this out. I want no supports in the middle of the cages. I want clear view, edge to edge. I want everything white, and I want to do live plants. And so he and I worked hand in hand for about a year, designing the enclosures and building out the plan. And then he and his team flew from LA and came here, and we had a pod arrive in the driveway that was full from end to end with stands and enclosures, and we started the build. I think it took 5 days to get a nonstop building to get all the enclosures put in, and then he's worked with me ever since on doing modifications and custom enclosures and stuff like that. So if you're interested in Boelens or baby Boelens or cool chameleons or geckos or anything, Dale's the guy to go to, and he'll really build anything you want. He comes from a unique background, and he did high-end storefronts for like Gucci and Mont Blanc, and
it shows definitely. You can see the translation of it through his enclosures. And when I came to your place, I had seen little bits and pieces of photos of your stuff. First off, you have an absolutely gorgeous home and property, it's beautiful. But then your enclosed, your snake, I'm trying to find a word for it. I don't want to say snake room or reptile room, because it's not that. It's a living gallery. Your home is beautiful, but your snake gallery is another level. And that's what is you can see that. And I tell people so many times, I was this hobby's expensive, regardless if you're working with Boelens pythons, emerald tree boas, Amazon basins, green tree pythons, or corn snakes, or other various colubrids. The hobby's expensive. And we owe our animals the utmost respect and utmost care we can provide. And your enclosures and the space that you've designed is just a testament for that. So hats off, man. It's one of the nicest snake galleries, I'm going to start using that I've ever been to. And your animals look fantastic. It's just, you know, it was beautiful. And I was just really thankful that, you know, you let me come down and visit. And I wish we had more time, but, you know, next time, we can spend more time and everything like that. And I got to see, you know, not just with the Boelens, but you're working with all sorts of other really cool species too. Like you've got some incredible Amazon basins. Like I kept like looking in the corner, like I was just like, you know, I'm like, oh yeah, the Boelens are over there. And I just kept looking at that one basin that you had. And I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, there's some, Gary Schiavino is a friend, and he's been able to get me some really cool basins over the years.
Gary's a good guy.
Ed Marino, don't know him that well, not friends, but I bought a couple of cool basins from him over the years, and so those have been really fun. I've never reproduced them yet, but my oldest ones should breed next year, hopefully. So that'll be really fun if that can happen. And
so if anybody is a hardcore basin person, start setting aside pennies now. Anything you can, because when those animals produce for you, which they obviously will, they're going to be, I mean, the parents are absolutely incredible looking. And I'm not a huge basin guy. I mean, I love all reptiles, and I do have favorites, and I respect everything with it, but there are some snakes, and there's a couple that you have. I was just like, I kept looking back at them, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm here for Boelens, but you know, that is, you know, and then you've got some really incredible retic projects too. And I've never been a big retic guy. Obviously, I think they're gorgeous. I've always been a big fan of just like a standard mainland, perfect representation for the species. But you've got some stuff that's like really, really unique. Can you kind of touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, I got started in retics, kind of how you're describing it is. I love the pattern of them, and but the size was a little intimidating, and talked with Garrett Hartle quite a bit, who, you know, specializes in the super dwarf and dwarf reticulated pythons, and worked with him and got my hands on a couple small cool ones, and then over a number of years, kind of like the Boelens, got really interested in the pure locality retics. So super dwarf retics come from really small islands, and there's the different island localities that are kept in the hobby. And because retics aren't allowed to be imported anymore, that's kind of what we have. So there's a tiny little island called Karampa, and so we have a couple breeding groups of Karampas. I think last year we were one of the only ones, or maybe there was another one that produced clutch of Karampas, and then ours were also Anri, so we had Anri Karampas. And then Madu is another island that makes really small retics, and so we have pure Madus, and kind of focus on those two localities. And then what was interesting with retics then is that people like Aubrey Pruitt, who are producing and do some amazing work with like ocelot reticulated pythons. And then now we're kind of going through and we're crossing the really small island specific, like the Karampa retics with a mainland ocelot, so we can start to produce really small versions of these really pretty snakes that allow a lot more people to keep them, a lot more people to keep them properly when you're dealing with a 6 or 7 foot snake versus a 16-foot snake. And there'll be some haters on there that say there are no reticulated pythons that max out at 6 or 7 feet, but I will invite anyone that wants to come. And we've got a third generation producing Karampa, and she is not 6 feet, and eats every week and is perfectly healthy and has never had any issues, and she's tiny. And so
I believe I recall that animal. She's little, and those ocelots, that's the first time I've ever seen those. Those are really unique. I thought those were really cool snakes.
Yeah, they're pretty fun. And then the other thing that I've been interested in a lot outside of the Boelens is anacondas, which is a funny thing to get into. But again, I have to blame Gary Schiavino, because
I blame him for a lot of things, including taking me to that horrible steakhouse. So
yeah, that one in New Jersey.
Don't eat steak with Gary; it's bad,
nasty. But I had said to him a number of years ago, I'm like, hey, I really want an albino anaconda, green anaconda. And he said, call Kristen at this number, tell her you know me, ask her what she has. And that resulted in me getting T-negative albino anaconda, and started with that. And then somebody, then actually Eric and Kristen, who own Fascination Herp, they're moved out of the country. And as they were moving out of the country, I worked with them, and I ended up acquiring their T-negative project. So I've got all their hets and the original female. She's in the big enclosure behind me, which I can walk over and show you in a little bit. But so she's 15 feet and beautiful, perfect T-negative that was found in the wild 12, 13 years ago as a little freshborn noodle that was ready to be eaten by something. And fortunately it was grabbed and kept alive, and she's thriving today. And so ended up with some of the albinos, and then I have the 100% hets that we're raising up to have some males and potentially other females available. And then came across in the past year, a couple people have produced anorthristic green anacondas. So that's a black, white, and gray anaconda. Jeff Fields with Paragon, and I'm going to be in trouble, but I'm forgetting about the other guy who produced them. But was able to get two different bloodlines of the anorthristic. And so been working on those projects. The anorthristic aren't 100% het. The non-visuals aren't 100% het, because I have some of those. And long way around it is that's kind of how I got started in a new company that I'm involved with, which is called Phenome, which is a genetics testing company. And I went and reached out to shedtesting.com. This was maybe 9 months ago or something like that, which is owned by Charlie, and his kind of friend Patrick was doing a lot of genetic work. And I said, hey, I need to figure out what's in these non-visual anacondas, because if I know, one, the pos hets that I have change in value extensively. If you can say this is a het exanthic, it's worth way more than a pos het. So they said, yeah, do you know what? The anaconda's never been mapped. Let's map the entire genome. Or I said, let's map the entire genome to find this out. And they said, it's never been done. And so let's dive in and do it. And got to know him and got to know Patrick. And Patrick is also, he co-authored the genome with you on Boelens pythons. Yep. So he's a guy that's dedicated to both the hobby, the craft, and the science. And I thought that was pretty cool. So started down the path with them, and there were so many cool opportunities coming up with the genetics testing that we ended up forming a company, and the name of that's phenome.com, and bought and partnered with Charlie. So shedtesting.com turned into phenome.com, and we're doing all sorts of cool genetic testing, really high end with great background quality control, and testing a bunch of new species. Which I think will propel the whole reptile hobby forward. When you start knowing what you're dealing with versus guessing, a whole lot more fun things can happen. And bringing that back around to Boelens, I think, you and I talked a little bit when you were in town the other day of, whether it's people who are watching today or if something we launch more formally in the future, but just to start testing Boelens sheds, not necessarily because you need to know what the genetics are that you're going to breed to or whatever, but just to maybe start building a database of how close they potentially are relation-wise, relatability testing, or just like, even if that doesn't matter, let's just document this one is number 4251 and we've got its DNA, and this one will hopefully be around for a long time, and could be a cool project. Just that.
No, I think it's a fantastic idea, and you have like 120% full support from me on it, whatever you guys need. I think it would be really cool to set up not just for like knowing what you have, but like you said, to build up kind of a lineage thing. And during the course of doing all those testing samples and this and that and yada yada, who knows what things we might key in on that we're not even, expecting or something like that, which is the exciting part. And I mean, you've got people in your situation with these other companies, putting together, coming together and form basically one big company with all this experience and everything. Is just going to be proving so many cooler avenues to look into, and so many other hidden projects, or just creating some, solidifying things that we've questioned for years, which is awesome. What was I going to say? Oh, back to your anaconda thing. I was really interested, obviously anacondas are such an iconic animal. I mean, anybody and everybody knows what an anaconda is. Not everybody knows what a Boelens is or an Amazon basin or anything, but do you feel like with how, because I mean, obviously you've got groups of keepers, you've got, large constrictor keepers, small constrictor keepers, things like that. Do you think there's a lot of interest in the anaconda keeping side of the hobby? Or is this just kind of more like a pet project that you're really passionate about, where you're wanting to see where it goes?
I think it's the latter. I don't think anacondas are good for many people to keep. And one thing too, I've seen just with my experience with anacondas over the number of years is just the dependency on water. Some people be like, oh, you can put a water tub in there, you can do whatever. Really, they're a water snake that should have some land versus a land snake that should have some water. And I've seen the health difference significantly between a tub of water and a tank of water, and a big anaconda going to the bathroom in water. It's a whole different level of keeping, and there's just not many people that are set up for it. So really, I'm not looking at mass production. I'm looking at creating some cool things. I mean, transparently, my ultimate goal is to make a snow anaconda. So cross that axanthic with albino and have essentially a white on white anaconda. That would be fun to have in a exhibit or in a feature display in your home or basement or something like that. So
yeah,
and they're long projects, for 7 years, 14 years to get anacondas, from breeding age to then breeding out and crossing back and stuff. So it's not anything about producing them and marketing them. It's that let's know more about them. And so
and for a lot of people, I mean, obviously this is a very unique, like one of one project. So there's a lot of money involved in it. I'm sure, and I know. So it really makes me really happy knowing that somebody like yourself is doing that, is a passion project. Like, this is something you're really passionate about doing, and it's, and you're able to do it, and you're able to do it right, which is another testament, and it's like, I'm just excited to see what happens. I mean, like I said, anacondas are so iconic. Everybody knows. I mean, and who doesn't love this big mossy-ish brown green kind of, cryptic snake that lives under the water and stuff like that. I mean, it's so cool. But now that you've got an animal that's like highlighter yellow with patches of white on it, and then envisioning something similar that potentially is like a white on white giant underwater constrictor. I mean, that's just super cool to me. I mean, it's neat. It's, and I know there's a lot of people that are hating on like genetic morphs and stuff like that. It's just like, this isn't keeping animals in your basement in a 40-gallon tank. You've invested tens of thousands of dollars in these enclosures, and like, people can't get an idea of the size of the enclosure behind you. And you've got an adult female, or she's adult, or would you say something?
Yeah.
She's an adult female.
14,
yeah. And I mean, this is legit. This is really, something special going on. And like you said, like, husbandry for anacondas is a very different world. I deal with a big female at the zoo here, and fortunately enough, we have a really, really big enclosure for her when we're using like pool filters and things like that. But it's like you said, like somebody having an anaconda in their basement, it takes a big crap. It's like, that's a whole thing where most people are going to have to like take out the water tray and empty the water tray. Well, it's not about, it's a different level. It's a different level.
And even, with experience, I set this whole thing up and I did like an automatic water drip changer and these filters and all this stuff. And it took her and I knew what I was dealing with. I'm not a total rookie, and I locked things down. I made things really protected, and it took her 12 hours to completely destroy that system.
Right.
Flood the floor and everything else. So
right.
So I was like, okay, now we've got to approach this differently. And that's that's part of the fun. Is I think every reptile keeper or everyone that's been around for a while, problem solver is like, that's in our blood, because that's all we have to problem solve all day long. And I think that's half the stuff of what I like doing is, okay, let's design this enclosure. Let's figure out how to do that. Let's do this, or we've got to figure out how to breed this. It's problem solving. Like how do we cool this?
My only vice with the whole thing would be just how neurotically OCD I am. How do you keep your glass in that cage so clean? That was the other thing.
Well, as you probably know, like too, it kind of goes with all the enclosures. Like a little bit, mine are oversized in a lot of cases. The bigger space they have, a little bit less work it is for us. Like, because it's just less concentrated. And then a bunch of the enclosures are, I don't want to call them bioactive, because that's probably going way too far. But
no, some of your cages are definitely bioactive.
Yeah. But after a year or two, there is a whole biome in there that helps with, like, our bedrooms are right above the reptile room here, and I haven't had a complaint yet that there's horrible smells going up into my wife's area or something like that. So it of course there's a regurgitated rat every now and then or something like that, and you're like, got to get that real quick. But beyond that, the plants and the insect load in those enclosures of isopods and whatever else that just naturally shows up do a really nice job at breaking the nasty stuff down and eating sheds and taking care of stuff. So.
There's like two sides of like captive keeping. You've obviously got your very sterile kind of environments, and then you've got these naturalistic bio setups. And I've always, even as a young kid, keeping things, I always went with that bio kind of mindset. And I've tried, I do keep some things like very sterile, like, baby eyelash vipers or baby Trimerosaurus or things like that, just because it's just easier in my mind for some things. But like, I think a lot of people can be intimidated with going a biological setup. And I really think once you get over that fear, the worst case scenario is you change it back to what worked for you. But by going forward and trying a bioactive setup and some things, you're gonna establish healthier animals, both physically as well as mentally, because you have all that mental stimulation from plants and soil smells and things like that in the enclosure. You're also going to be observing different behaviors that you might not be able to see if you had such a sterile environment too. So like, I really try to push people to go that route, and it's also, in my mind, it's just so much nicer. Like when you walk into a collection and the first thing you encounter is that smell of, plants.
Yeah, of a garden center, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Like my daughter, like when I get done, going through my Boelens at the house, I do spot cleaning, once a week. I'll go through and I really do a heavy spot clean and stuff. And she'll come in there. She's like, the first thing she says is like, "Oh, I love this smell." And it's that smell of like the wet moss and the soil and all that stuff. It's just a refreshing smell. It's natural, and the animals really feed. They feed off of it. It's important, and it goes back to me saying like we owe our animals much more, in my opinion, than having them on paper towels and things like that too. And I'm not knocking people that do it that way and have done it that way. It's just, I think we can do better, and I'm going to keep going back to your enclosures because they're beautiful. And and I can see all the work and everything that's involved. And it really, your animals really show that from the way you've done it.
And when I first was doing bioactive or planted enclosure with reticulated pythons or Boelens or anacondas or whatever, people are like, no way, they're just going to get trashed. And I'll say, there are some individual snakes that'll trash more than others, but I've talked a little bit about how I got it to work, and it doesn't have to be super expensive. If you end up doing a Home Depot or Lowe's or a local nursery that'll give you a good deal, or taking, I bet just about every local nursery has a back room of plants that are too dinged up to go on display, and see if you can buy off those plants. But what I do is I take an enclosure and I pack it front to back, left to right with plants. And then the snake goes through and decides what it wants to stay or not. So it'll make its path to the water bowls or its path to the basking spot or whatever. And it'll leave islands of plants and moss intact to some extent. So it won't look like the day you set it up. But once that snake settles in, I found that then those areas that aren't touched as often, or those species of plants that do well with the snake, they thrive and they fill in and they do really well over time. So it's a little bit of upfront cost, but once you have those plants that do like that environment and survive in it, those are growing for the life of your enclosure. So like paying more for those, and maybe in the long term, it's less expensive because you're not switching out substrate as much if you've got a well-growing system. I don't know.
Yeah, and also you're learning another craft too, where you're learning, you're understanding like plants and horticulture, and and I'm the type of person, I just love learning things. So it's like, as reptile keepers, we enjoy that. So, and you're also going to learn like what works well in that enclosure. Like, can I put this type of plant or this species going to work? No. Okay. Well, then let me try something else, and like you said, like, the animals are going to start making little paths, going where they're going. They're going to make their routine. And those smells become more prevalent for what they're going to follow. And also, I always will set up an enclosure, or try to, at least a month or two before the actual animal goes into the enclosure, so those plants can have time to establish. I'm not going to go and start putting stuff in right away, because it's not going to grow. It's going to be so stressed out. You've got to get some growth going first.
I forget about that, but because I have done both versions, quick, get this done. And then also, the snake's delayed again, and the enclosure's up. And you're right, those ones that sit for a month or month and a half, those plants are so much more settled in and do so much better over the long term. So that's a really good point.
Well, you just have like a lot of really cool projects and stuff going on. And it was just, like I said, I really was real thankful that you brought me in. I really appreciate that, to see all your cool stuff. And let's talk about Boelens pythons now. Let's talk
that's what I was going to say too. Is,
I know, right? So you are working with a very nice group right now that you've got some breedable animals, and you've got some young animals you're working with. What is your group right now totaling?
It's 5 breedable females that are all currently paired up or in rotation of pairing up, and then a total of 14 animals. So there's 4 of this size. These are some that Gary sold over the past couple of years.
Nice.
And 2 unrelated pairs from him are the younger ones. And then the rest of them are kind of menagerie of acquisitions that are older ones. And to the point about like enclosures that are planted or not, we went the route of, for the females, keeping more simplistic enclosures. So those are Reptichip and some shelves built in, and kind of a warm side with basking and a cooler side. And those, we opted for that more sterile, so we can really not miss details with the females. So seeing what feces, what sheds, not allowing them to necessarily hide too much in a planted, so we can see their actions and the actions of the males when we pair them. So the females are in more sterile-ish enclosures, but as you and I think know, the feces and the urates and stuff play a big role in everything. So it shouldn't be sterilized, but they're in those. And then the males rotate through different planted enclosures, and because they're kind of always on the move, and we just keep them fed, fat and happy, or not fat, hopefully. But
and to touch really quick on what you said about like with the feces and the sheds and stuff like that, I want people to understand that when you're saying, okay, we've got feces and shed, you're not leaving piles of shit in your cages. I've observed numerous times that I like in the wild when I'm in these active areas where these animals are relying on biological markers, which are in fact urates, scat, and shed. And these, for whatever reason, play a crucial role in their biology, especially where females are utilizing nesting areas and signaling to other females that this area is occupied, or to even signal out to other males that are passing by that, hey, there's a female here. She's cycling, now is my time. So these are critical things. But like when you apply it into your husbandry and enclosures, you're obviously, when the animal defecates, it urates, or it sheds, that those waste products, I'm going to use waste products, I guess. Yeah. Waste products, biological markers. We're going to go with that. Those biological markers, are left in for a certain amount of time. They're not just, in a hoarding situation where it's just piling over and over and over, and you've got this giant termite mound of shit. And then it's removed at a certain point. So I do that with my animals, both at the zoo and then my animals in my personal collection, where, if the animal defecates or it sheds or it leaves a urate, I'll leave it in there for a couple days and then I'll pull that out. So it's not that I'm keeping a incredibly sterile environment. I'm allowing these animals to say, okay, this is my territory. I'm going to leave these marks here. I just wanted to point that out, so people are like, oh gosh, So
that's a super good point. And I think too, on my end, I've got tubs with a hole in the top that they go. The females have these tubs, and those tubs are not covered, but they've got urates and smears on them, and those I don't touch as much. But if they defecate anywhere else in the enclosure, the cocoa chips, anything, that's all picked up. But kind of some people walk through that aren't used to reptiles, and I'm like, no, it's clean. That tub is a little smeared, but that's on purpose. That's for a reason. But definitely there's no standing.
That's her nesting area. That's where it signals the male. It creates comfortability, I think it's and to the female. And those are important things to note. I'm not saying don't clean your cages, but these are things like you don't. It's okay to leave sheds in there for a week. It's okay to leave a urate on the tub top, for whatever. But keeping snakes clean is important, obviously, because we're keeping them in a controlled environment, so they can't just move in certain situations. But it's important to have that familiarity with scent and territory marking. I think really plays a big factor with these particular snakes. And I know Stephen Cush has such great success with a lot of his scrub python reproduction, and I do believe he does stuff similar as well, and I could be just talking out of my ass, but I do recall seeing in some of the photos he's posted, he'll have some urates left in there, or he'll have some sheds and things like that too. And I'm sure he feels very similar about that as well. So, but you're with your animals. What are your feeding cycles with obviously with your young animals? What are you feeding? How often are you feeding, and what are you feeding your young guys?
Yeah, like the small ones, just weekly, appropriate sized rats, and then a lot of chicks, both quail chicks, chicken chicks, larger quail, larger chicken, kind of through those, and that's more regular. And we do this same, not as often, but with the females and males. And I think just each one's a little individual, but keeping that body condition in check, so there's nobody that's obese. I think in general with most of the snakes in my collection, we feed regularly, but not excess. I don't think there's really any obese snakes in the collection, because there's so many that some people, that's the interaction and excitement with their snake is watching it feed, and I'm going to feed it again. That's not the drive for here. So it's keeping healthy.
No, all your Boelens looked like they had like great body mass. Their condition looked fantastic. They were perfect examples of what the animals should look like. They weren't obese. They weren't thin. You could tell that, the animals were dialed into their environments just right, because I remember walking in and looking, and the animals were just very content. They were resting. Nobody kind of turned around real quickly and erratically at me like, oh, is it feeding time or something like that? It was just very, placid and calm. And the animals showed it. So it's now, at what point do you transition into larger prey items, or frequency or infrequency with your animals?
As the fall approaches, that's so kind of what we've been working with is late September, October, November, December, January is kind of the prime season for getting things ready to breed, and then into the pairing, and then hopefully some ovulation and hopefully some eggs. And it's in 2021, it was kind of an accidental clutch. And we had one animal go, one egg go full term. And as you and others that are friends know, it was me on the phone with you as soon as I saw the eggs laid, and then during the whole process. And then I was camping, had video on the eggs, looked, and I saw the eggs pushing, and raced home from the camping trip and came back and cut it open. And I was on the phone and video with you, and I can't remember who else was on the phone, but talked with Keith McPeak was there, and we are just like, what do I do? How far do I cut? Do I probe?
Yeah.
And it ended up that fully formed Boelens suffocated in the egg and died. So that was a bummer. And then moving and building and doing the rest of the space, doing what I talked about for the feeding and kind of prepping, we started pairing animals lightly in kind of October, November, much more intensely in December and January. And we ended up getting 2 clutches. And there was a third clutch that we could palpate and just feel these eggs. And then at the last moment, she kind of reabsorbed, which just seems almost impossible to reabsorb the size that we were feeling. But she didn't have any stuck eggs or anything like that, and didn't lay. But the 2 clutches that we had, the eggs just didn't go. They died out over the coming 2 weeks, and then it was kind of back to the drawing board. And so this year we're doing some things the same, but I think, which everyone tends to say, it's temperatures. And I know when you came, you're like, it's warm in here, and I'm like, it's a battle to get some of those enclosures as low as we want them to go. And so that's something where we turned off all the heat in the enclosures, and then just turned on a 25-watt basking bulb that's on for a really short period of time during the day to kind of mimic maybe what you see, I don't know, when you're in Papua, but a glimpse of the sun coming through the clouds. The snakes rush up to a branch, soak in some sun, and then go back and hide away. And so that's kind of what we're doing. And we've got
it's so funny to me to hear that you're saying, it's like, oh, I have trouble getting it so cool. And it was like ice on the ground outside and like feet of snow. I'm like, dude, open a window.
Open the door. Yeah, exactly.
Open a window.
I should do that. And then, so feeding, and then kind of temps, and then the males, last year we did multiple males with the females, and that worked with with the 4 breeding females last year. One of them, the 2 males fought within 2 hours too aggressively, so we had to pull out and just do the one male. The other ones let us keep 2 males in with them the whole time that we were breeding, kind of pulling them in and out. But the 2 males in there definitely combat, definitely go after the female, produce a lot of scratching on the female. So we know that was working.
Now with before you keep, so like I've seen a lot of breeding scars in the wild, obviously too. But do you think so you said you had aggression with 2 males when you put it with your female, correct? Now was the aggression towards the females, or was it the 2 males being aggressive towards each other?
In the one case, the 2 males were biting each other, like just going full on attack.
Did you feel, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but did you feel that it was related to possibly, do you feel like one of the factors was the size of the enclosure that you had all 3 snakes in might have been like too small, or do you think it was just a charged, kind of sexual kind of thing going on, and it was, that's what you were witnessing?
Yeah, I think the second one, just because they didn't have time to figure out that their enclosure was too small.
Okay.
They were kind of like, no, this is mine, and just going at it. And versus the other enclosures, they were, spiraling and sparring and kind of engaging with each other. But then they'd all clump up and there'd be a pile of 3 of them in the corner, and they didn't seem to be, nobody was pacing the enclosures or pushing on the glass or doing anything like that. And then we had the enclosures we'd pull them out of, so we'd kind of try and cycle them. But I think where we did last year is maybe we brought the males in too early, and the viability of the sperm was lost. That the female wasn't at the right level of receptivity before that started to wane out. And so this year we're waiting a little bit longer with introductions. We're trying to cool it off, and we've got one that's got follicles right now that we can definitely feel. So there's promise there. I guess she's looking full and fat and happy, and
nice.
And the other 2 are iffy, and then one of them's a first-time female, and she hasn't shown too many great signs yet, but she's.
What are the ages on your animals that are being paired up? That first off, what were the ages of the animals that produced those several clutches at first?
6, 7 years old.
Okay.
And then, and it's the same.
And that was, the males were 6 and 7 also, roughly?
Yep.
Okay.
Some are from Mark Miles that he brought in from Bushmaster in I can't remember, 7 years ago-ish. So he brought it, that's where some of the pairs came from. And so no exact ages on those. Others are a little more iffy depending on where they came from. But
okay. Yeah.
The other thing with, my attention deficit coming in, but
no,
I thought from starting with Boelens is just test for the Nido.
Yes.
You and I both
good point.
We've been through that in the past, and when I say they came from different sources, that's the absolute most critical thing, is get them from a good source. That's why.
And to go to like touch on the little Nido thing, because I know there's been a lot of discussion with Nido in general, where people are becoming more, I mean, there's people that are aware, obviously we're aware of it, it's been around for years, but now I feel like within the last 10 years or so, like it's got a name to it now, because I remember before we'd bring in animals, they'd come in with a respiratory infection and mouth rot, and then they would die, and we would attribute it to that. But now we're starting to be able to test for things, and we're seeing that there is some virus now it has a name, and it's called Nido, and it's absolutely horrific and horrible. And you and I both have experienced it, and there's no shame with that at all, having animals that have had it. It's part of what we do as herpers and herpetoculturists, is we're learning signs, we're learning behaviors and things to benefit us in the long run as keepers as well as our animals. And I've had Boelens that have had Nido. I know you have had Boelens that have Nido, and it's a very interesting virus to experience. It's so like damaging, like mentally, as well as obviously the animals, because they eventually will die. However, I know Frederick has an animal that he has had for years that he's kept separate, and whatchamacallit, and that animal is still flourishing right now, which is fantastic. But Yeah, it's not a bad thing to discuss it. You've got to be aware as keepers and such. And I got to plug my laptop in. That's so embarrassing. So finish that talk.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say to Nido with Boelens and buying from trusted sources like Gary or whoever, and like in the case of buying from Gary, he Nido tested everything twice. So once when he was starting to raise them, second time before he shipped them out to anyone, he Nido tested everything, which was critical for me. I really wouldn't have bought snakes from Boelens from anyone without a Nido test, or at least 2 Nido tests prior to being sent out. So I'd if someone's looking at getting some, I know there's some on Morph Market or other places, I'd demand some Nido tests before you get them in your collection. And then in general with reptiles, I think a reminder that with all species, there's pathogens everywhere. You know from your visit, I keep sheep, goats, horses, other stuff too. And as you dive into those worlds, there's the Nido version in sheep. There's the Nido version in goat, not Nido, but the virus that is transmittable and carries and may not kill them, but results in other effects. And
exactly,
it's just with everything. And horses right now, Texas is dealing with huge horse virus issues, and it just is out there. So when you're getting in the hobby, just put that as part of your program. Of like,
it should, quarantine should be part of the hobby, no matter what. I mean, regardless of the source. And it's nothing against that person. Like you could have somebody like if I sold a Boelens python, if I produced babies and I sold the babies, I would want that person to quarantine those animals. Obviously, for a certain point of time, obviously animals are going to be tested and things like that too. But, sometimes you need to do 2 or 3 of these tests sometimes because the virus won't show. And, shipping an animal to another destination is a perfect time for opportunity for testing because a lot of these viruses activate themselves with stress, and that is a stressful situation. So, like you said, it's very important for people to. This should be in your bag of tools. Nido testing, crypto testing, the sources, things like that. And it's not to say that if you do get an animal that comes in from a source that has it, it's not to say those people didn't put Nido in that animal. It's just for at whatever stage of that animal's life, it was exposed to an animal that was positive and it glammed onto it. And what we're seeing a lot of with a lot of species with Nido is, Nido is not typically a naturally occurring virus in certain species. They're, contracting that virus in a scenario where they're being exported in an area with hundreds of other animals that could be in very poor condition, and they're just kind of taking that virus on and transferring of tools and things like that. It's very easy to maintain clean environments and clean practices with your animals, but it's also very easy to forget to put that tool in a chlorhexidine or wipe it down with alcohol afterwards, and sharing, my snake didn't eat today, or it didn't eat a few minutes ago, so I'm going to give that rat to something else. It's like, no, I know a lot of people that'll do that, and I don't. I will not share prey items if they don't eat it.
That saliva is a big
it's a huge transferring agent. And like I said, Frederick, he still has an animal, and she is, she gives signs every once in a while, but she's in a separate building. I believe he said he's had her separate from, and she's got like her own tools, her own area where he walks into, and there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no reasoning that an animal, 2 positive animals can't produce non-positive animals.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know of anybody that's really produced Nido from Nido animals, just because those animals typically don't live that long.
But I think in green trees, people are doing it.
I think so. I wouldn't know. I'm not a big green tree python guy, so I don't know that the green tree python world is much, but I wouldn't doubt it. And like I said, it's one of the things, like, it's our responsibility to test this stuff, because we want to have healthy animals. Because if we continuously test our animals and we have negative animals after negative testing, we'll eventually phase out some of this virus in some of these big collections, and this could be a thing of the past eventually, or we have a definitive, you know, treatment for it down the road, you know, which presents itself too. So, but yeah, I don't want to jump off on that. So you produced multiple clutches from your animals. They're roughly around 6 to 7 years old. And was there anything during your reproductive the reproductive times or the cycles that you noticed that repeated itself throughout different scenarios, or through the different breeding scenarios?
Other than the reliability of putting 2 males in at that time and then watching the action just substantially increase in breeding activity happen with that. So that was just a cue that happened. But and then off food for sure, the females going off food, and then, you know, the palpating of the different levels of ovulation or follicle development was not easy. And I think that's one area that would be key in learning more of, is to be hands-on and be tracking that development more closely, because that might just be the key to really dialing in exactly the right size, when you should be pairing them based on size, versus sometimes getting our hands on them, sometimes visually seeing some things, sometimes them going off food, whatever. I think getting the hands on and knowing where those follicle sizes are.
Yeah. And then that will translate later on down the road with more of, as we progress with reproductive state on animals, where it's like, okay, I remember during this time of the year, she routinely has follicles this size. And I've never been good at palpating. I've palpated a wild female and I could feel them, because obviously she was like weeks away from laying, so I could feel eggs. But I've never been like one of those guys where I close my eyes and I let them crawl through my hand and I'm like, oh, they're 1.2 centimeters or so. I just can't do it. Yeah. It's just, I accept it. I accept the defeat on that, and it's fine. But I
would do it, and it's probably just a big feces in there.
Yeah, right. I'm like, oh wow, it's really big, and then they shit on your pant leg or something, exactly. You know. But I was going on to a discussion with the follicular size. Have you noticed any similarities when you were doing palpating for certain times of the year? Because I feel like, personally, I feel like a lot of people, I mean, Boelens pythons, you know, they breed. That's not a problem. Getting them to breed is not a problem.
Yeah.
Getting females to go full term in the cycle is the issue. And I feel very confident that a lot of, you know, it's the male that's the issue. It's not the female. And I think a lot of times people will pair animals up too early and will miss that opportunity of, you know, peak follicular development, where that female is like, she's ready, because, you know, obviously like, oh, they're breeding, they want to breed, but Boelens will breed anytime. So did you notice any particular, particular significant repetitive, you know, timing that you would see, you know, your peak follicular development or anything like that? Or
I was faked out a lot last year and panicking almost that I was going to miss it. So it would kind of go in waves where I'm like, oh, here it is. Okay. We need to be getting them, and then be dumbfounded as to, okay, why isn't it happening? And then it did. So I almost went through 2 or 3 waves of thinking I had it and missing it, when in hindsight, I should have waited. Like December, January is, I think, much more, at least for my animals, that hot spot of when they're going to be at peak follicular development and peak breeding time, versus last year I was like October, November, okay, December, it's getting too late. Like I was kind of in the panic of missing the boat, versus thinking a little bit harder about follicular size, sperm development and that type of stuff, or viability. And I'm hoping that makes a difference this year in viable eggs, but no. So I'm still learning, so I don't have a great answer to that, other than patience. Like,
yeah,
I think it is.
That's all we have to do. Is
in North America, it is December, January, February-ish.
And in the wild, there's females are laying eggs from a set amount of time. It's not they lay eggs from in June or whatever. It's it's the wild. That's the challenge. We're trying to create a captive environment that is conducive for successful reproduction. In the wild, they're relying on the environment to control everything, so things change like that. So females will lay. I know of animals that have already hatched in the wild. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, and now there's females that are sitting on eggs right now that are getting ready to hatch in another 3 weeks. So it's not set in stone time frame on it. It's just it's an expanded window, I guess, that works. And then you've got also, when you're comparing wild stuff to captive stuff, you've got elevation differences, you got location differences, the regions are different, but I feel like I said before, I feel like a lot of keepers were and I've been, at fault of this also, because I've gotten really, really close as well in the years with my older animals when I had the older animals. And I feel like I was pairing my animals way too early, where I would automatically be like, oh, okay, cool. Female's looking good. She's starting to get a little swelling going, and she's starting to behave a little bit different. Like she's, developing follicles or getting ready for the season. And I'm like, I'm immediately going to put the male in right now. It's like, and that was my, the worst thing I could have done, because I exhausted all that male breeding and potentially viability of that sperm too early, where the female was like, she wasn't even ready, even there yet. Yep. And also, like I said, I feel like a lot of times the males in captivity are just not getting that cool exposure that they really need to drop down. And I'm going to reference one of the other earlier podcasts I did with Paul Miles, and he mentioned a situation when he was breeding his animals, and obviously he did it very textbook style. It was like, pair the animals now, females gravid, collect the eggs, watch the babies hatch. It's just like, it couldn't have asked for better. It's like, it's so frustrating, and he noted on a thing where he couldn't get his temperatures as low as he wanted. And I've got to look back through my notes, but I believe it was down into the lower 50s. But the interesting thing with what he experienced with his success was, during his cooling cycle, his room could only get to a certain temp. And then it would reach that temp for maybe an hour or two, and then it would quickly rise back up to a baseline, still cool temperature, but not to that low temp, where it's almost like in my mindset where, a lot of times, like, okay, we're cycling them down to 55 degrees and we're going to leave them at 55 degrees for 3 months. Can they handle that? Of course, they're designed to do that. However, when they're being exposed to that really low temperature for that amount of time, it could almost put that female into a survival kind of mode, as opposed to a reproductive cycle mode. And the interesting thing with Paul was his animals were exposed to 55, but it was only for a short duration. And then it went back up to a more comfortable temperature. So that could have in itself signaled to the females, like, okay, it's the season, I'm going to start developing, blah, 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 as opposed to, I'm going to have to control all of my resources to keep me alive at this cold temperature for 3 months.
Yep.
It's a wild, outlandish idea I just thought of throwing out. So
one thing I might be, depending on how things go this season too, is moving some of the Boelens outside in Minnesota this summer. In the spring and the fall, it can get down to those temperatures, and being able to bring them inside if it's going to go extreme at a certain time or not. But I think going through those light cycles and temp cycles that are natural to outdoors, I think would be good. I kept Parsons outside in Minnesota for a number of years and had really good success with them breeding. Craig Durbin has those animals now, and I think he keeps almost all of his outdoors too, and has really good success with.
He's such a cool lizard.
Parsons chameleons, but that in trying to with the Parsons, getting down to in the 50s or the high 40s happened at night for a few hours, and then it would pop back up. And especially when there was sunshine that would come versus a fully cloudy day, I think those things could make a big difference for Boelens. And maybe I'll just try 2 females or something and a couple males and see if there's something that happens there. Because I think that was there a German couple or a person that maybe had some success. I don't know.
Yeah, they had these big outdoor aviaries, which was really nice, and the temperature. I can't remember the temperature. It was it was in the first book. I've got it written down again, obviously, but it was, relatively similar to those temperatures, maybe not to that extent, but obviously it was in an outdoor enclosure where the environment was dictating a lot of the change and everything. So the animals could, go to an elevated platform to warm up, a little bit better. They could go lower if they wanted it cooler. So they had a lot more options. One of the cool things that I'm really excited about trying is when my animals are ready to go, because I have, 3.4 animals I'm raising right now, is I'm going to do a couple different breeding scenarios to do different scenarios with the group. I'm going to pull a pair from this side. I'm going to pull a trio from this side, and I'm going to try a couple different things during the season to see what changes and if things work, or if it dictates some different behavior that I wouldn't normally have seen. So, that's cool that you're thinking about doing an outdoor setup, which would be freaking awesome, man. Like, and see what happens. You might see something very different, or something might just really kick. And to kind of go into that a little bit more, like, I know, we don't have a set recipe for what's working. We have some great successes and I'm considering you as a success. Although you haven't hatched your eggs, you've gotten to that point where 90% of the keepers have not. So that in itself is a success right there. It's just tweaking those little subtle things to bring you to the end of the finish line. And I know Scott Flood is having a lot of success, and he has a great regiment for his animals at work. And then I go back to Paul Miles. He had a single pair, and he did it textbook style. So one way might not just be the only way to do it in the scenario that you're given. So I think, and I'm going to reference this a lot because I say it a lot of times, a lot of keepers, we don't understand how to read our animals. I think that is the biggest thing. We have to read our animals because they're not all the same. They're the same species, but they're not all the same. Yep. So one thing might work this way, one thing might work better that way. So I think understanding our animals as individuals and then relating it to what we should be doing or what we think at the time is the right way is a really powerful tool to have. And I'm really excited to see what success you have or what changes you have this coming season with your animals. With that just being said, because I really feel like you're going to do it the next time or the time after that. It's going to be like, oh, okay, this worked now.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I didn't realize that you just said, which I think is important, when you said look at the animals, like when someone's thinking about setting them up, put them in a place where you can see the animals. Like you said, like that's kind of seems common sense, but you're right. The more eyes that you have on the animals, the better. Again, with the livestock stuff that I just had a vet out last week, and he said the number one thing you can do for any of your livestock animals is look at them. He's like, just be around them, sit with them, do anything you can. And that when you said that kind of reminded me, be looking at your snakes. And Keith McPeak, I think, did that. He wrote a lot about how he watched and observed things. And I think
rhythm of the room, that's what he calls it, the rhythm of the room. And I'll go in my snake room, and I'll sit there with a cup of coffee and I'll just watch. It doesn't take any time to just sit and observe, but what we can gain from that amount of time of just watching our animals and the behavior, we can pre-predict things too. Like I'll be at work and be like, all right, right now the lights are getting ready to turn on. I know exactly where my animals are going to be at, and I'll go up there, I'll turn on the camera and I'll watch and be like, there they are. They're all coming out of their nest boxes. They're all getting ready to bask. Or, okay, the lights are off. They're going to sit out and bask for another 45 minutes, and then they're going to disappear. And these are things we wouldn't really be, privy to have just because we're not taking the time to observe our animals and learn to read our animals, which I think is so critically important. And One of my other questions I have to ask before we start kind of dying down on stuff, because I know I could talk for another 2 hours with you on stuff, was in any of your breeding scenarios, did you ever see the blood smears?
No, I don't. No, definitely feces smears and urate smears for sure. But who was it that would see the blood? Was that?
There's been a couple people. So Frederick has seen it. There's been some Europeans that seen it. Scott has seen it.
And is that from the male scratching the female, or is it something?
So we still don't know. My theory on it is, maybe an overzealous male spurring the female's cloaca too much, and he's tearing some of the tissue. But I was talking to another friend of mine, Brennan, and he says he's seen it in chondropythons also, and he actually witnessed it where the males' hemipenes were what were bleeding. And they were using that. But like nobody, like we don't know, but I find it very interesting because there are some species like Savu pythons will do it also. D'Alberts will do it as well. And obviously Boelens will do it too, but not everybody that has success has seen it. And there could be some factors with that as well. Like, you've got a really naturalistic enclosure. It's going to be hard to see anything like that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I was just curious to see if you'd witnessed anything like that. And like I said, man, I'm really happy I finally was able to get you on.
Do you want to see a quick little? Do you want me to try and walk the camera around a little bit?
Yeah, it could be great. I'm sure people would love to see that.
Check out the anacondas at least.
Yeah, we'll go back to anacondas now.
I have to lose the Boelens. I just set him down. But
so people can see some of your incredible enclosure.
This is Annie. She's in deep shed, so she's kind of a whole tone lighter. Let's see if you can.
So cool, man.
You can see her.
Well done.
Kind of there. I don't know if you could. Yeah, you can see her. Yes.
Yeah.
But so that's her enclosure. The other enclosures, kind of like we're saying, Superdorf retics. This is kind of typical of the enclosures, but
it's a gallery.
Yeah, there's let's see, Boelens. There's a pair in there. This one's
out and about.
That one gave me scars. He's bit me before, so
it always happens. There's always one or two that are a little extra friendly.
Yep, and then there's our Eastern indigos in here too. I didn't mention them, but they're pretty fun. So and this is like the little Boelens we keep in these enclosures. So the one I just had out, he's actually, that's a female from there, but that's
wonderful.
That's kind of
they're well done, man. Well done. And you're doing Arcadia lights or Zoom Ed lights on your fluorescent?
Arcadia Luminize, which has been a fun trick to be able to replicate those seasonal shifts with the dimming and dawn and dusk and stuff like that. Still some tech quirks to work out with the Arcadia system, but for the most part, it works pretty well. Yeah,
they're great bulbs. Like I say, my go-tos are Arcadia and Zoom Ed for just the consistency. If not everybody can afford to get Arcadias because they are expensive, and you do have to do a little bit of finagling with, your setups on them sometimes. But like Zoom Ed are great just because like you can, they might not be putting off the most intense amount of UV, which is not bad, but they're going to be consistent. And that's what we want. We want consistency. We don't want these off-brand products that are putting off like ridiculous amounts of UV for like a week and then they just die off to nothing. So it's it goes back to just like do your research on stuff, and ask people. Don't be afraid to ask people. And if there's anybody out there that is not sharing information with their stuff, don't talk to them because that's rotten, man. Like we're doing this. This is fun. This isn't,
it's supposed to be fun. Yeah.
This is supposed to be fun. And this is benefiting our animals. So if there's some jackass that doesn't want to share information to you about certain stuff when you're asking questions, just don't talk to them. It's like, it's just how it is. There's a lot of rotten people in the world. And fortunately enough, there are a lot of good people too. And like I said, thank you so much, Josh, for coming on. I look forward to seeing what you continuously build and what new projects and everything. And if there's any, if people want to get in touch with you, can you, how does somebody find you? And
a couple things. Workshop Reptillium on Instagram. I don't spend much time on Facebook, so mainly Instagram. You can direct message me there, and I post regularly on updates from Boelens and other species, stuff going on. For the genetic testing, at Phenome Genetics, phenome.com for cool stuff there. And definitely reach out if you're interested in sending in sheds. I'll mark you down, take your contact information, test the sheds, and then get back to you with the results if you're interested in sending any of those in. And then last, also Tamura Designs, check out his stuff. Yes. He puts a lot of cool enclosures in his builds there. He's also an Arcadia supplier, so he can integrate all of Arcadia right into the systems right from his place. And then third, definitely go to Project Black Python and support it. And I think stay tuned for what Ari's going to see next, because
I've got all sorts of stuff I'm working. I just submitted a grant with a friend of mine, Dr. Kyle Finn in Sweden, and we just got an incredible letter of recommendation from the Port Moresby Nature Park in Papua New Guinea to support our project in the Highlands with the Chimbu tribe as our guides. So I'm really working on that. With that, and we're going to be doing accelerometer work, hopefully. So we're going to be monitoring animal behavior and movements, and also, being able to document animals from the eastern side of the island, which is still very, there's hardly any information about these animals in the wild. It's awesome. So, but once again, thank you so much, Josh, for coming on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I know you're a crazy busy man, and it is hard sometimes to track you down, but when I do, it is always a good time. I'd like to say, hope you guys enjoyed. Is there anything else you'd like to add, man? Or
no? Thanks for the friendship, all the information and support. It's been tons of fun.
Always happy to talk Boelens. Always happy to talk. Always happy to hang out. I had fun. Did your goat have babies yet, or?
Nope. I'm still checking the camera every hour.
Awesome. Well, as I wrap this up, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for more exciting podcasts. You can follow me at projectblackpython.com, the Boelens Python Roundtable, and of course, Trap Talk Reptile Network. I will see you guys next time.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for following. If you're looking for other ways to learn about Boelens pythons, please feel free to follow me on projectblackpython.org, Project Black Python on Instagram, and of course, the Boelens Python Roundtable. If you're looking at ways to help out with my research and project, I've set up a donation account through PayPal, boelenspythonconservation@gmail.com, link below, which will allow you to send donations. All donations are used to purchase new field equipment, help with logistics, as well as help support these local communities that I've been working with for years. Once again, thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you on the next episode.